They thought he was just another black man they could push around until he pulled out his bar card and shut the whole courtroom down. It was supposed to be a quick stop. A simple errand on a quiet evening in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The man, tall, sharp-dressed, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knew his rights, pulled into a well-lit gas station. He needed to grab a bottle of water before heading home. Nothing more, nothing less. But the moment he stepped out of his sleek black sedan, he noticed them. Two white officers, sitting in a squad car near the entrance, eyes locked on him like he didn't belong there. He felt it before he even heard them. That weight in the air. The tension that black men in America recognize all too well. "Sir, hands where we can see them," one of the officers called out, stepping out of the cruiser. The man sighed. "Here we go." "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was calm, measured. "You fit the description of a suspect involved in a robbery nearby," the second officer said. The man raised an eyebrow. Fit the description. He was wearing a navy blue three-piece suit. Who robs a store in a tailored suit? "All right," he said, keeping his hands visible. "I'd like to see some identification, and I hope you have body cams on." The officers exchanged a glance. They didn't like that. "Turn around and put your hands on the car," the first officer snapped. The man let out a slow breath. He knew how this went. He had spent years studying cases exactly like this. "I'm not resisting," he said, slowly placing his hands on his vehicle, "but I do know my rights." And that was all it took. A hard yank on his arm, a knee in his back. Bam! His chest slammed against the car's hood. The cold metal bit into his cheek. "Stop resisting!" one of the officers barked. "I'm not resisting!" A bystander pulled out their phone, recording. Voices rose in protest. People knew what they were witnessing, but the officers didn't care. One grabbed his wrist, twisting it back hard. Too hard. "You think you're smart, huh?" the second officer muttered, tightening the cuffs until they cut into his skin. The man clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He could fight this, but not here. Not now. So, he did what they never expected. He went silent, because he knew something they didn't. And in that moment he decided he'd let them dig their own graves. But this wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom in East Baton Rouge Parish was cold and impersonal, the kind of place where cases like this played out the same way every time. The man sat at the defendant's table, hands resting on the polished wood, his face unreadable. He wasn't new to this setting, but never from this side of the room. The judge, an older white man with silver-rimmed glasses and a reputation for siding with law enforcement, barely glanced at him as he shuffled some papers. Judge Ronald Whitaker. "Let's get this over with," the judge muttered. The prosecution's case was simple. Too simple. The officers, Officer Bradley and Officer Henshaw, sat confidently on the witness stand, sticking to their script. Defendant matched the description of an armed robbery suspect. He became hostile when questioned. "We feared for our safety, so we had to detain him." Nothing new. Nothing surprising. The judge nodded along, uninterested. It was clear he had already made up his mind. Then came the footage. The defense attorney, a public defender assigned to the case, played the video captured by the bystander. The courtroom fell into silence. The grainy footage showed everything. The man standing still, the officers escalating, the unnecessary force. But Judge Whitaker barely reacted. "Looks like standard procedure to me," he said dismissively. The public defender leaned forward, frustrated. "Your Honor, the defendant never resisted. The officer's report contradicts the video." "Do you have anything else?" the judge interrupted. The public defender hesitated. "That was it? Just like that?" The officers smirked. The judge turned toward the accused, his tone dry. "You got anything to say for yourself?" The man finally spoke. His voice was steady, controlled. "I do, Your Honor." And then he reached for his briefcase. What happened next changed everything. A hush fell over the courtroom as the man unlatched his briefcase. Every movement was slow, deliberate. The officers, who had been sitting with relaxed smirks, suddenly stiffened. The judge tapped his gavel impatiently. "Let's keep this moving," he said. The man ignored him. He pulled out a small leather-bound case, flipped it open, and placed it on the table in front of him. A bar card, the kind only issued to licensed attorneys, but not just any attorney. The man finally leaned forward, locking eyes with the judge. "My name is Wesley Grant, and I am a U.S. attorney." A dead silence. The officers' faces drained of color. The public defender, who had been prepared for yet another losing battle, blinked, stunned. Judge Whitaker coughed, shifting in his seat. "Excuse me?" Wesley spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the courtroom. "I have prosecuted federal cases in this very district. I have worked alongside officers who actually respect the law, and I have personally fought against the kind of systemic misconduct that you are now trying to dismiss as standard procedure." The air in the room changed. The officers no longer looked so sure of themselves. Their hands twitched on the table, their postures tense. The judge's face darkened. He wasn't just dealing with a random defendant, he was dealing with someone who knew exactly how this game was played. But Wesley wasn't done. He tapped the bar card lightly with his fingers, then gestured to the prosecutor's table. "I assume you'll want to revise your case, Counselor?" he asked, his voice cool. The prosecutor, who had been ready to coast through this trial, suddenly looked uncomfortable. He glanced at the judge. Judge Whitaker shifted in his seat. He knew he was in trouble. "Mr. Grant, But Wesley wasn't interested in excuses. He straightened, adjusting his suit jacket. "Let's get back to the facts, shall we?" he said. And then he went to work. This was no longer just a case. It was a reckoning. A heavy silence hung in the air. The shift in power was undeniable. The officers, who had been relaxed and smirking just moments ago, suddenly looked like men walking on a tightrope. Wesley exhaled slowly, resting his hands on the table. His voice remained calm, measured. "Let's start with Officer Bradley's statement." He picked up a printed copy of the police report and read aloud. "The suspect matched the description of a robbery suspect, refused to comply, and was restrained due to resistance." Wesley looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Officer Bradley, do you still stand by this statement?" Bradley hesitated. Yes." Wesley nodded, flipping to the next page. "And Officer Henshaw, you also wrote, quote, 'The suspect attempted to flee, requiring the use of necessary force to control the situation.' That's your sworn statement, correct?" Henshaw swallowed hard. "Correct." Wesley picked up a remote control and pointed it toward the courtroom screen. The video footage started playing. Every lie unraveled in real time. There he was, standing still, hands in full view, never moving, the officer's hands gripping him, twisting his arms. The judge shifted in his seat. The prosecutor rubbed his temples. The air in the room grew thick. Wesley let the video play until the moment he was slammed against his car. Then he paused it. Complete silence. Wesley turned back to the officers. "Where exactly in this footage do you see me fleeing?" Neither of them spoke. He let the silence linger, let them sweat. Then he set the report down. "That's one lie." Henshaw shifted uncomfortably. Bradley's jaw clenched. Wesley moved to the next sheet. "Now let's talk about body cams." The officers flinched. Wesley turned to the judge. "Your Honor, May I remind the court that Louisiana law requires officers to have their body cameras activated during any interaction with a civilian. Judge Whitaker cleared his throat. Yes, that is correct. Wesley tilted his head. So, imagine my surprise when I requested access to their footage, only to be told that their body cams were conveniently malfunctioning. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Judge Whitaker looked toward the officers. Is this true? Bradley shifted in his seat. The department has occasional technical issues. Wesley cut him off. I checked. Your department's last reported body cam malfunction was 6 months ago, and even then, it was for a single officer, not two at the same time on the same call. The lie collapsed. The officers had nothing left. Bradley looked at Henshaw. Henshaw looked at the judge. There was nowhere left to turn. Wesley sat back, placing his hands together. I'd say that's lie number 2. The judge looked furious, but not at Wesley, at the officers, and just like that, the case was no longer in their control. Judge Whitaker's face was unreadable, but his fingers tapped lightly against the bench, a nervous tick. Wesley didn't let up. 2 lies so far, he continued, his voice steady. But let's talk about the arrest report. He lifted the final document. This report claims that after I was placed in handcuffs, I was hostile and verbally aggressive toward officers, threatening legal action in an attempt to intimidate law enforcement. Wesley's lips curled into something close to a smirk. Now that's interesting, because I never said a word after they cuffed me. The courtroom was silent. Wesley turned toward the bystander sitting in the audience, the woman who had filmed the arrest. Ma'am, he addressed her, did you hear me say anything aggressive after I was handcuffed? She stood, gripping her phone. No, you went completely silent. Wesley nodded. Exactly. And here's what's even more damning. He lifted the report again. It was filed before the body cam footage was lost. The judge's eyes narrowed. Wesley set the report down. This isn't a simple misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Officers Bradley and Henshaw falsified statements, erased evidence, and used excessive force on an innocent man. He paused, then added, a man who, by pure chance, happened to have the legal resources to fight back. The weight of that statement hit the room. How many others had been in this exact position, without the power to expose the truth? The officers were now visibly sweating. The prosecutor looked defeated. The judge? He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Judge Whitaker adjusted his glasses. He cleared his throat. Mr. Grant. But Wesley wasn't finished. He straightened, smoothing out his suit jacket. Your Honor, I'm formally requesting that all charges against me be dropped immediately. Additionally, I am requesting an internal investigation into Officers Bradley and Henshaw for misconduct and falsification of reports. Judge Whitaker hesitated. His jaw tensed. And for the first time in this entire trial, he looked afraid. Wesley knew why. This case wasn't just about one arrest. If these officers were found guilty of falsifying evidence, it could reopen every case they had ever worked on. The judge knew what that meant. A storm was coming. He exhaled sharply, then finally spoke. The charges against Mr. Grant are dismissed. The officer's head snapped up. The gavel slammed. And just like that, the case was over. But this wasn't the end. Not even close. The courtroom emptied quickly. The weight of what had just happened wasn't lost on anyone. The officers stormed out, their once confident strut replaced by hurried, nervous steps. They didn't even look at each other. Judge Whitaker lingered for a moment longer, adjusting his robe, avoiding Wesley's gaze. He knew. This wasn't over. Wesley gathered his papers, calm as ever. He didn't need to rush. He had already won. But outside the courthouse, that's where the real fallout began. By the time Wesley stepped outside, the news had already spread. A small crowd had gathered. Activists, reporters, people who had seen the video and knew exactly what had just gone down. A journalist shoved a mic toward him. "Mr. Grant, how do you feel about today's ruling?" He adjusted his cufflinks. "I feel like the truth was forced into the light." Another reporter spoke up. "What's next?" Wesley looked directly into the camera. Accountability. Because this wasn't just about him. This was about every black man who had been stopped, brutalized, arrested and silenced, without a bar card in their pocket to fight back. And this time, the system didn't get to sweep it under the rug. Within days, the Baton Rouge Police Department launched an internal investigation. Within weeks, Officers Bradley and Henshaw were placed on unpaid leave. And within months, multiple cases they had been involved in were reopened. Wesley sat in his office weeks later, staring at a folder stacked with names. People who had been wronged, people who never got their day in court. He sighed, closing the file. One case was over. But the fight, it was just beginning. And here's the thing. Wesley was ready for it. Stories like this happen every day. The only difference? Wesley had the knowledge and power to fight back. But what about the ones who don't? That's why staying informed matters. That's why we have to hold the system accountable. And that's why no one should ever have to fight alone. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Because silence? That's how injustice survives. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that expose the truth and demand justice.